sort of a Naples yellow, a yellow, okay, and then a or yellow ochre, okay, and then a burnt sienna, black, white, and ultramarine blue. So I think that's you're going to say, well, that's a relatively basic palette. I can show you through the history of painting. I can show you the number of artists that just worked in this palette. All right, and the success of their work. And one in particular is John Singer Sargent. So I think that when you start to realize that in instances that artists are working with a variety of different ways of thinking, all right, what I want to do with this particular course right now is we're going to be talking today, and you'll see it here as we start, but we're going to be talking about some mixing a little bit, all right, and then we're going to be talking about constructing a painting using these colors. I had you work in black and white first. You could do a painting in black and white again if you haven't done it, or if you want to try it again. All right, whether you're on a white surface or a dark, light surface or a dark surface, it does make a difference. Okay, the kind of way you actually handle the values and the colors. So finding a ground, as far as I'm concerned, for you is important. And a lot of beginning students think to start on white, and you got to understand something about starting on a white canvas. The only reason why it's white is because I guess they needed to coat it with something, and instead of trying to pick a color for it, they felt that they could sell them all if they were white. All right, or maybe white is the cheapest color that they could put into the what we call the ground, okay, or the size, which actually seals the canvas. There's no reason, okay, the canvases are white. As a matter of fact, prior to the 20th century, canvases weren't. So I think that this is one of the things just to keep in mind as well. And I think the thing is, if anything, how difficult is it to work on white? I think it's quite difficult, because every color is a dark color until you cover the canvas. So that's where we are with that. So these are the things that I have here. I want to show you some other things that I have. I have mineral spirits, which if you were watercolors, we would call this water, right? The different brushes that I have, okay, and can you work with brushes, any type of brush you want? Yes, you can. As a matter of fact, I gave my last class that studied with me this term, their last assignment is to fill a sketchbook with a calligraphic pen, all right, and then make a painting just with calligraphic line. So, and they can use color. So the thing is, knowing brushes is real important, and most, as far as I'm concerned, most oil painters particularly don't really learn to use the brush. And I think this is one of the things that you really want to recognize about yourself, that there are a lot of different approaches to using a brush. Jennifer Bartlett is a good one if you want to look at Jennifer Bartlett's in the Garden, all right, because she wound up painting 200 different ways with a brush. And I think or with different brushes. So just keep in mind. So these are some of the brushes that I have. And one of the first brushes I'm going to show you is a filbert, which is a round brush. And when you talk in terms of it's rounded, but still flat. So, you can see from the side that it's a flat brush. But one of the things about the filbert's a scumbling brush. It's a brush you sort of use in the beginning of a painting, all right? Or maybe even at the end of a painting. But the thing is that it's usually used to what we call scumble, which means that we just kind of lightly put the paint on the surface, all right? I do have then a flat brush, and you'll notice that most of these are bigger brushes. One of the things about the flat brush that's important, let me see if I can get this right here. The importance of the flat brush is that we didn't see a flat brush until the 20th century. It was very fascinating, but artists had really, I guess there were places that were making brushes, but they were mostly round brushes. All right. And it wasn't until the metal furrow came along, this part right here, that they were able to make flat brushes, and then paint started to be applied in heavier, thicker strokes, and laid on in a kind of pattern of the brush stroke. And I think when you look at the Impressionists used a lot of flat brushes. So I think that was the key to Impressionism. And I think that just keep that in mind. Then besides that, then of course I have the round brush, which is, and I have different sizes of these brushes, but here's a round brush, and usually a round brush is used for drawing, and it's just a completely round brush. All right. One of the things I'll show you later, I have some brushes, they're called Keep Smiling brushes that I buy on Amazon. Lately, I've been buying the cheapest brushes that I can find that are really good. And the unfortunate thing about cheap brushes, they fall apart. That's their big problem. But these are this group of brushes. Most of them are from Princeton and are called the Aspen series. So that's what I've been using. All right. And there's a chisel brush here, which is very much like a flat, but can give you a straight line as well. And I think that we know what the quality of a brush is when we look at it this way, because if it's really pointed, all right, at the ends, it isn't flared out, then that the brush is still in good shape. So when it starts to kind of mold into something else, that will you continue to work on it with them? Yes, but they lose their properties and gain other properties, okay, based upon the fact that they're just wearing out as you're continuing to paint. So those are the brushes. That's the mineral spirits. I have oil here. I always keep some oil, particularly when I want to start a painting. And by the way, if you ever if you need to sign your paintings in oil and you have trouble signing them, the easiest way to do that is to lightly rub some oil on the dry part of the canvas before you sign it. All right, and just very lightly, and then your brush will go on that oil very nicely. So keep that in mind, because a lot of people have trouble signing their paintings, and that's one of the things about oil. It actually spreads the paint. So you see what I've done here. I've separated the warms and the cools. Next week, we're going to talk color, and I want to discuss that with you as well. But one of the things from my way of mixing, and just to give you an understanding of that right now, okay, the thing that I'll tell you is, you see how I've kind of placed things out, and do I use a lot of white? I find myself using a lot of white, but usually when I go to mix a color, okay, I'll take my brush and just take it with the paint. The brush is clean. I'll place it there like that. I'll clean my brush off. All right, I always try to clean my brushes off before I do anything. All right, and then I'll take that piece of paint and mix it into this. All right, and if I want to adjust its value as I go along, and you hear me cleaning my brush between each stroke, and I'm just wiping it in my rag, then the next amount would be here, and it would be perhaps lighter, and then lighter. And the reason that I have two whites, by the way, is eventually I wind up kind of contaminating them a little bit. And I think that I try to keep so when I start to mix my cool colors with this, I try to use one of these for the cool and one of these for the warm. That's how I use my paints. Okay. So the next thing I want to do is does anybody have any questions about this at this point? Some artists pre-mix their colors ahead of time. They actually literally will take these colors and mix another color from that. So for instance, we'll talk a little bit about this right here. But if we decided that we wanted a combination of these, all right, we might take, and here I'm using a palette knife. All right, put some of this down, which is essentially a yellow ochre. All right, and clean off my palette knife, of course, and then take the blue and mix it in. And depending upon the amount of the yellow, all right, it will become greener. So you can see that the yellow, you can see the different values that I have here of two different greens, by the way. Okay, and that's real important. So pre-mixing next week for this assignment, you might want to pre-mix some of these color combinations to see exactly what they do before you start. For instance, taking this here, mixing this on here like this. All right, to make sure our palette knife's clean, and see what each one of these colors does. All right, so you can see that we have that combination going on there like that. With a little bit more blue, all right, it takes on a different color. And if we were to mix, this color with this color, obviously we would get something as well. So I think that you could pre-mix your colors just to see what's going to happen. I can tell you that we have black on our palette, and we have ultramarine blue, and we have burnt sienna. In a way, you don't really need the black, okay, because you can actually make the black with burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. So white, black, burnt sienna, and ultramarine blue will work as well. And I think that's one of the things to keep in mind. Okay, any questions on that right now? So you can practice mixing the different ones. The first things I want to just discuss with you is, first of all, when you do select the subject, all right, have an idea of why. All right, it might be nostalgic. It might be, of course, you're going to use the term inspirational because that's one of the reasons why you chose it. But in the case of, say, a building like this, that's a certain period of time. It's sort of like a Hopper house, comes out of the 30s. It may have been Hopper who inspired you to paint this house. It's really funny, but a lot of artists that you're familiar with have a lot of influence on how you see and think. And I think that you start to realize those influences are really important in understanding these things to begin with, all right? But now the thing that I'm going to do, this is really, from my point of view, there's a series of things that I really want to get you to recognize how I work, all right? And how I work is, if I had a sketchbook, the first thing I'm going to do before I do a painting is just do a sketch. And Rembrandt liked to make a window to begin with, all right? But one of the things I have to kind of bend around here, so I just want to make sure I'm not in your way exactly. I'm okay right here, right? You don't see me yet. Do you see me here? No, okay. So one of the first things, and everybody's there right now. Everybody can hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Okay. One of the things that I want you to understand is that I like to go to a situation like this that inspires me. Now, somebody's going to say, well, I have a photograph. What do I do with that? Do I just start painting from the photo? I would tell you no. I would tell you to draw it. All right. That would be the first thing that I would tell you before you even started with the photo, is to do this. So my advice to you is to start at your feet and not have a preconceived idea of where you're going to end up. I know the photo is the way it appears here, but truthfully, I'm going to show you how I'm going to begin this. I'm starting with the curve that's going along that line there that you see, all right? And I'm coming back, I'm coming up to where that piece of light is that's here. And that piece of light is going across the uh, uh, over the curb, and then it's kind of going over the sidewalk, and it's going along this line here, and it's going down like this. All right, that's the first line that I drew. That line helps me to move beyond it. All right, and so what I'm going to be looking for usually are lines that connect. But the reason that I'm looking at doing something like this, all right, before I draw even the building, I'm not even drawing the building right now. I'm just starting at my feet, okay, is to get shape. And by the way, do you see the speed by which I'm drawing? Okay, that speed is real important because that's how I know how to draw things in proportion. So I just want you to understand that. So now I'm going to go up the porch of this house, go back like this, go up here like this. This may be a different way of drawing for some of you. All right. You're going to say, well, it's going to be distorted and it's not going to be in proportion. Well, I hate to say it, but the camera doesn't make things in proportion either. All right. So I just really want you to recognize that. But you see me now kind of following a line. All right. And I might just at this point, all I'm doing is exploring this. Understand that this is what Paul Klee says when he said, take a line for a walk. All right. So I'm feeling the distances and things like that in here. And you see how I made that window. I can go above that window if I want, if I thought that I wanted to go higher here. Okay. So I could do something like that. But you can kind of get an idea of how I can make this work. But this is a working drawing. That means that I'm just exploring how this is working. All right. And I want you to recognize the importance of this, because far too often we lose sight of the fact that we have our minds tell us what to do, and I'm not listening to my mind right now. I'm following my eye. So I think that this is important to recognize. And so now you see me coming down, and I can look at where things line up, and this line and this line are very close here, and then that goes across like that. So now you see I've got an interesting idea already. And if I was just to say conceptually, if I decided that that's all I needed to put some interesting colors against one another, why would I do any more? All right, if this is interesting enough, why not stop? This is one of the hard things about beginners. Beginners don't recognize what's interesting. And if it's interesting, you don't need to go any further because it's interesting. All right. And that makes it successful. But if you're not satisfied, okay, then we'll come back and we'll perhaps push this idea a little bit more here. Okay. And now we're following the house. And actually, I want you to understand something. I have two ways to go here. I can go up to the point of the roof and come down, or I can go to the right. Whatever your mind tells you, you can follow. But my feelings about this are that you don't listen to your mind sometimes. You do the exact opposite. All right, here I listen to my mind a little bit more. And by the way, as I'm drawing, I'm seeing a line between here and here. So I know how high to make this. Okay, and that's one of the other things about drawing that you have to learn. Also, how things line up. So now we're going out here. Now, how far out do we want to go? Well, that's going to be up to you. All right. But let's say we decide to go out to the end. All right. There's my composition. I didn't really plan it. I might have wanted more of this side over here. Okay. But this is where it ended. But guess what? That might be a better spot part to end than the other place. What I want you to recognize about this is that we generally have our composition and our placement. These are kind of the major shapes. All right. From there, we can work off of any of these things. All right. We can work off of something like this. Okay. And just take your time and follow it. And it doesn't have to be straight. Okay. But we're just trying to find our corners and things like that. I'm looking at this up here. I'm looking at this down here. All right, just to make sure that I've got it where I want it. And then I might work my way back a little bit. The chimney is before this, so I have to fit that in a little bit like this. All right, come up here, feel that shadow that's going across, something like this. And then it goes up the side of the building, the shadow, and then hits the roof. And we have to decide how much of the roof we see. Okay, and then that goes up like that. You see how good a drawing I've become? All right, you know why? Because I do this all the time. All right, if you did this all the time, guaranteed you would get good at it. I just think that people tend to not practice their drawing enough. All right, so if anything, now we can kind of make some things happen here, and all of a sudden our building starts to look kind of like a building. All right, and of course we have our shadows going on the top of this porch here. Porch comes over like this, comes over to a corner, and then it kind of goes back, something like that. And of course we have our windows and whatever. How much do we need to do this? All right, we need to do it enough to make sure that we have an understanding of what's going on here. All right, this is a working drawing. It doesn't necessarily mean that we have to draw everything here, but if we did, it might help us to recognize what is here, and then work from that. But I think that this is where we are right now, and so that might be now my painting. All right, and if I want to add windows and things like that, I will. Let's just explore this a little bit more over here, so that we can kind of get an understanding of this space. Looks like an interesting drawing, doesn't it? That didn't take long either, by the way. All right. So I just want you to understand how that works. And by the way, if I can connect the line like that first, and then kind of come back here and do that. So there's my drawing. What do you think? You see that?
Walt, what
Yeah.
is the tool you're using?
I'm using this a Sharpie. This is a Sharpie.
A Sharpie. Okay, thank you.
All right.
Yes,
So,
it's remarkable. But you picked out the lightest light first, right? Or your light. So you've already made your light and shadow in your mind. That composition is there.
well, that composition is there, and truthfully, I mean, we can come back and continue to work on this, by finding the pattern of shape that's in here, both dark and light. Okay, that being a dark shape, here's a light shape underneath. So really what we're after is you making shape, all right? Because if you have your shapes, all you have to do is find your value and color for those shapes, all right? And I think that the thing that often happens is that students don't put all their shapes in. So for me, I would be drawing all my shapes. I would highly recommend that you either draw this on your canvas or that you draw it, in your sketchbook, and then build that idea from that. Okay, so you really want to push those shapes and that as much. Now, if you want my opinion, my composition is better than the one of the photograph, and I didn't plan it out. That's one of the interesting things about it. And guess what? If I didn't have enough room for the house, then I could either tape another sheet of paper next to it and put the house on, or I could wind up playing with the, redoing it perhaps by making it smaller. After I've done this, one of the things that I want you to recognize that's important about the next step here is, and I didn't put all my information in, so I may have to put it in as I'm working, all right? But one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to squint, and I'm going to look at where my strongest darks and lights are, all right? And one of the things that I'm going to tell you is that a lot has to do with edges. And if you squint, one of the first things you see is this strong edge right here. It doesn't seem like it's a real strong dark, but you can see that edge is very clear. That's what I will search out first whenever I start from the next stage here, is to kind of look for that. And my eye will be pulled from one thing to another, and it's fascinating. But down here, I didn't really put this in here, but there is a tree trunk right about here that kind of goes like that. All right, and that tree trunk, what's fascinating about that is that my eye went here next. Okay, and then the third place my eye went was up here, especially at that edge right there. Okay, so you can do this on your paper. All right, you can see that this is where there's a really strong edge, and this will help you to understand the edges to begin with. But you should be putting your information in, all right, with by the order of the darks. All right, that means going from the darkest dark toward the lightest light. So little by little, you'll see me putting in the dark shapes. Okay, and I'm putting them in all as one value. We're going to talk about this in a little while, but this is what we call the notan, or the the division between dark and light. And I'll discuss more about that as we go along. But this is important to recognize. What I'm doing here is trying to build a pattern of dark and light. Okay, so if anything, you can kind of get an idea that this is how I would be building this idea now. All right, and I want you to recognize something else really important about what we're doing here is the patterning, all right, of these light and dark moments really define your composition as well. All right, so little by little, all right, I'll be going into the dark shapes in sort of the order by which I see them. So it's easy to go with the really strong darks first, so you understand where they are. For instance, the darkest part of this tree is in here. All right, so what we're trying to do then is little by little, and you notice that I'm trying to draw the whole shape in and not have a lot of streaky lines, okay? But because of the amount of time and how big the drawing is, it's taking longer to do this. All right, but this will give you an idea that that's sort of where we are at this point. Then I'll squint, you know, if all of a sudden my eye goes to this dark here, then I'll put it in. But the key here is the order. All right, so you know, if my eye goes up here to this window, then I'm going to put it in like that. Okay. Now, some people have trouble with their drawings being accurate. All right. There is a thing called triangulating, which I'll send you. But one of the keys to making a drawing is to establish a certain line and its distance, and then measure things off of it, meaning that I'm going to use that line there to find this point. Okay. And that point might be higher than what I made it. I'm not going to change my drawing, but it's sort of up a little bit higher here because that point went like that. All right. That would be done ahead of time before I did any of this. That's called triangulating. Keep in mind that what we're talking about is using one line and lining up to there, and then lining up from there to there, and it will give us the point. That's called triangulating. So I'm not going to talk about that so much today because that's not as important at this point. I'd rather you paint like Soutine than paint too realistically at this point. All right. So we don't need that. Definitely, we don't need to have those kinds of things. So just keep in mind that you're putting in, you know what your strongest darks are. Okay. You can see them. And if you see where your strongest darks are, then you know that you can put every one of those in because you know they're a dark. But now we're going to get, and here's a dark here. All right. But now we're going to get into what we call the halftones. The halftones, when you work this way, you lead to the halftone. Well, that means that you're going toward the grays, and the grays are considered halftones. And so keep in mind that the notan is all about the black and white and the what we consider the design in black and white based upon the pattern of the lights and darks. But keep in mind that there's a certain point where we know what the darks are. All right. We know that like this is a little dark here, right? But we also know where the grays are. And this side of the building here might be interpreted as a gray. It's definitely not a light at this, or I mean a dark at this point. It's more of a gray. So you don't put anything here until you've gone in and put in all your darks. And your darks might be grays here, but they're still darker because we know that they feel like a dark compared to feeling like a gray. That's real important. This is what we're talking about here. This is a gray. All right. And it really reads as if we squint, it reads darker than the sky. But it's lighter than this. And because it's lighter than this, we have to make a decision in designing whether we're going to keep this as a light or we're going to keep this or make it into a dark, because grays can go either way. They can go toward the light or the dark. I'm going to talk about this later. All right. So right now, I'm not going to go any further other than to say that we want to put the darks in the order by which we see them. Teach yourself to do that. If anything, you can learn from a photo, because a photo doesn't move. If you're out painting this in sunlight, it's constantly changing. That's the hard part. All right. But if you're working from a photo, this is not changing. So you can go ahead in and put your really study your darks and where they are, all right, and just put them in first. And then realize that you're working toward the halftone. And I think that's what I want you to recognize. There's a certain point where is this a light or a dark? It's darker than the sky, but it's lighter than the shadow. So what is it? Well, for design, we have to make a determination whether we're going to make it into a light or we're going to make it into a dark. And the design has to do more with what we're doing in the foreground. For instance, all of this foreground is in shadow. We know that this is all dark here. So I think that that's important to understand, that this is all dark space. So so you can see how I would be building that. And I'm not going to go there until I put all my darks in the order by which I see them. All right, any questions?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I'm going to go way back to the start, because for me to try and do this drawing, I would have had to start. I would have been moved to start finding a place to start. You put that curb in initially. The first line you did, the curb and the shadow boundary.
Right.
I would have done that probably through measurement.
Right. Well, you probably
now is that no, wait a minute. Is that wrong? Is that a bad way of starting?
Let me tell you this. All right. You're studying with somebody who's going to try and make some breakthroughs in your work. One of the things that you do is your mind tells you what you should see. All right. But guess what? Everything that makes you see it is not what your mind's telling you to look at. And it was the Buddhists who said the microcosm of the universe is at your feet. I always believe in starting with the foreground. All right. I work from the foreground back. That gives me more distance. It gives me an understanding of relationships. I'm not calling, by the way, this a house or a tree or anything other than patterns of shape of lights and darks. And what those patterns are doing are making me read something that I identify. Okay, so I try to take a more abstract way of thinking about this. And I just, this last term, so that you understand the depth of what students reach with me if they study with me for a long time, and that's that we talked about different approaches to thinking, which we started with what was abstract thinking, what was emotional thinking, what was conceptual thinking. All right. And I think that when you start to realize that you have a different, one of the things that I just showed you here is I started with no preconceived idea. Well, if you come with an idea, you're kind of blinded, believe it or not, because you don't see any more than that. And I think that what I'm doing is just following lines, and it's giving me ideas. And it's also giving me something that I would look at that I wouldn't probably really even pay any attention to or even think about to the end. So I'm not selecting anything. It's just where the line leads me. And I think that that's, if I can explain this to you, this comes out of the influence of the Japanese, which we're going to talk about. All right. But the Japanese were big influence on 20th century art. I don't know if you realize the significance of it. We tend to think that, the French were the big influence. No, the French were influenced by the Japanese. All right. So I think that this is one of the concepts of thinking. And when we do this, Walt, what we're dealing with is how we build an idea. Okay. And that's the key. And that's what Cezanne was about in 20th century art. He was about constructing an idea. How do you do it? Well, everybody does it differently. And is this a good way for you to learn? I think it is. I think it is because it teaches you shape. And it teaches you, one of the things that you see with my drawing, even at this stage, is that all the parts fit together like parts of a puzzle. And I think that you want to take that kind of concept, and that's what Gauguin was about. So I think that if you look at Gauguin, and how significant is Gauguin in 20th century painting? He's probably the most significant. I don't know if you realize this, but he told Serussier, and look up Serussier, by the way, the Talisman, because that's a great painting that looks like this. All right. But he told Serussier, he said, you should just use pure color to paint with. Well, nobody thought to use pure color. Everybody was mixing color. All right. So all of a sudden we have a whole period of painting because of somebody's awareness to doing it a different way. And I think that this is what I would tell you right now. If you're going to break any breakthroughs in your work, this would be a great way to do it. What would I tell you to do? Go get yourself a sketchbook. What would I tell you to do? Fill a whole sketchbook full of line drawings like this. All right. And you'll see the importance of it. So I hope I answered your question. Did I?
Well, you got to blast through quite a few years of engineering background before you're going to be able to change it. But it opens up some different avenues. That's for sure.
Okay, I started as an engineer. So
well, that's great.
Okay, so I just want you to understand. All right, this is why you're studying with me. This is what we're about. Okay, so
right.
With that, the next thing is to give you the painting demo. All right, I want to quickly do that, and then talk a little bit about the. Here I did my drawing, so I've got a concept of what I'm going to paint. Do I need to draw it on my canvas? I could again, or I can just start painting. All right. I have a sort of a photographic memory, so it's interesting how I do things. All right. But anybody that has any questions, ask me right now. Go ahead.
Yeah, this was very helpful. I really enjoyed that demo. But I was wondering how you came up really with that kind of composition when you kind of cut the house along that right side of your drawing. It really seemed to strengthen it. And I was wondering, is it a good idea maybe to draw the entire picture and then sort of figure out how to crop it to sort of frame the image that you want?
I'm going to tell you something. Every time I do a drawing like this, I get a great composition. I don't plan anything. It just happens. All right. And I think that had that building been cut off right here, it still would have been good. Had it been cut off here, it still would have been good. All right.
Okay.
It just fell where it fell. But I'm going to tell you, this way of drawing will give you composition. No matter what you do, you're going to have a composition. But this is going to give you a unique composition. It's not going to get, because you're not planning things out. You're not thinking how I'm going to place this thing. All right. I'm telling you not to think that way. All these classes that you've taken, perhaps, people are telling you to think that way. I'm telling you not to think that way. That's one of the successes of my teaching. That's why I'm where I am. I think that there's an art understanding how to, you have a variety of ways of making an idea. Where you start is critical. All right. How you start is critical. I think that this is something just to keep in mind. But for me, I have a picture in my mind of what I'm dealing with, but at the same time, I'm discovering things as I'm putting down these lines. I think that helps me quite a bit. All right. So with that, keep in mind that I'm telling you to have no preconceived idea. As a matter of fact, I always say, I don't want you to come with an idea. I want you to find an idea. All right. So where do we start next? All right. We're going to start. Go ahead.
Paul,
Mm-hmm.
one other question. It seems to me, and I'm sure you'll deal with it, that making the decision about whether something belongs as a midtone or a light is a very crucial decision. And I run aground there, not being able to make that.
I think Deborah, the important thing about that is that it's when you work from the darkest dark toward the lightest light, or the lightest light toward the darkest dark. Okay. In other
Mhm.
words, you want to understand that you work toward the midtone when you do that. And when you get to the midtone, you're getting to the point where things are let me see, I got Jessica here coming. You're working toward the midtone. So that's what I'm going to do here now. So I'm going to show you. I'm taking a little bit of oil, I put it on my rag, and I'm wiping this canvas. Because honestly, you need to have a surface where the paint will go on it smoothly. Watercolors. I don't know if anybody, Walt Turner, I don't know how familiar you are with Turner's watercolors, but Turner was one of the first ones to use wet watercolor paper. All right, where he actually worked wet into wet. And I think that the here we're using the oil sort of like that. We're making wet into wet by putting down the oil. Now, there are a lot of different ways that I can make this painting. All right. One of the important ways, let me get this one brush that I want. A second here. The because I was thinking how I'm going to show you how to start this painting. Well, this is how I think I want you to kind of work. Let's see, I did have these brushes here. Yeah, I guess I get one of these. I have a lot of these brushes, these 1-inch brushes that are buy at Home Depot. All right, I paint with them a lot, by the way. Okay, but what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take some I use a little bit of mineral spirits. Okay, and take some oil, and I'm going to coat my canvas with burnt sienna. This is wet into wet. This is could you do this with watercolor? Could you tone your canvas with water, or your paper with watercolor? Guess what? Most of the 19th century artists did. John Singer Sargent did. He would take a light pink, or he would take a light blue. As a matter of fact, Turner, in Turner's writing memoirs, it's said that he really makes a breakthrough when he works on a blue surface. All right, now this is watercolor on a blue surface. All right, so for watercolors to think that they always should be on white is another one of these crazy things that I don't know why some watercolors think that that's the only way to work. All right, it wasn't that way. Matter of fact, those were the earliest watercolors that didn't have white paper to even work on. They might have had a tan surface to work on. So I think that this is important. So what I'm doing right now is just lightly toning my paper, my canvas. And that makes it could I have used any of these? Could I use blue? I could have. All right. But this is a good way to kind of begin. All right.
And Walt, you're not worried about uniformity.
No, there's no. This is, as a matter of fact, we're going to wipe some of this away as we're working. I'll tell you that in a second. All right, but so we put that on. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is obviously I'm going to draw using a drawing tool of some sort. I wouldn't draw with a flat. I draw with a filbert. Okay, and or a round. So what would I draw with? Well, on burnt sienna, I could very easily still draw with burnt sienna. All right, now, remember I did my, my drawing, right? Remember how I was, drawing it out? Okay, well, guess what? This is how I'm drawing it now. All right, and I'm trying to get that same composition in. All right, kind of like that. So now you're gonna say, well, what what are these marks? Well, these little marks that are touches that are harder than others, that was where I'm really looking more solidly at things. Okay, and then there's a certain point where I can start to solidify things a little bit more as I'm sure of my positioning and things like that. This is where I might do some of the notan, or not notan, I'm sorry, the triangulating. All right, and remember I said the line here was the one that I said would be a kind of a unit of measure. Well, I decide how long that line should be. All right, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up from there to here, just to see, and I close one eye and line it up like that. See exactly where that line is as far as the top of that roof is concerned. Okay, and it's up here. And then I can come from the base to it. This is all arbitrary, by the way. I've decided where that line is. And this is pretty well where that moment is, that peak is, right there. Okay. And when I want the height of this peak, now that I've found this one, I can go from here to here if I want to. Okay. And it's going to give me a line like this. So here's where the peak is going to end, right about there. Now, could I exaggerate this if I wanted? I could, or I could make this line bigger, and then that would give me a higher pitch. So if I brought this line up here, that would probably bring that up to there, and then that would take that up to about right there. So that would give me that that pitch. So this would be where my now where my line is coming down this way, and of course it's going across like that. All right, so I can find where, like that window that's there, I can line up my crayon to the center of the window, and or my brush, and it lines up like this, and then come from this point to it like that. Okay, and this is where this window would be. So I had placed it over here, but it's really about right here. Okay, so that triangulating helps me to find certain measurements, like for instance, the length of the house now. It's going to be over here, right about there. Okay, and the height of that tree. This is the tough part about this view now. I've cut down the amount of the tree. All right, it made the building much bigger than I did in the sketch. That is another issue that I'd have to kind of conform to if I wanted that sketch to be exactly right. But we're going to go from there to the top of the tree, and the top of the tree is somewhere here. I'm going to go from here to the top of the tree now and just see exactly where it is. Well, guess what? It's not too far off. It's up here. All right, so I'm not that far. I'm happy that I was able to get some of this tree in. Okay, and then again, you can also be arbitrary and just throw it in like that. Okay, and let's go ahead and a couple other things I want to do here. I want to find this piece here. Okay, here's my engineering background, Walt, just so you understand it. Okay, lot of triangulating that that we're talking about. Okay, let me make sure I get this one right here. And this one is right here, like this. This is about the width of that. And we want to just make sure we get that organized. And of course, then we have our porch, it kind of comes off of that. All right, and you know, sometimes you can line things up, but other times you can eyeball things, which means here's where one of the posts are, the other post is somewhere that lines up with about here. That's that one. And then this kind of comes over to about here. Let's just make sure we get that angle right. And that's where our porch is going to be. Okay. And then we plug that in there like that. Then we got our little bush here. And let's go ahead and put in this now. This doesn't take long. This doesn't take long to do. All right. We want to make sure that we have the right size. Porch is coming down here. This is the underside of the tree. This is where the tree is in shadow. All right, and underside of the tree like that. Porch is here. Windows are there. I just want to make sure I get the size is just right. Okay, and then of course, then we're going across the street here. So then I could measure this out, but truthfully, I don't need to because I've got most of the placement where it should be. Okay, so now you kind of see how I'm setting this up. All right, and this is a pretty good stage for a start of this painting. Okay, and I think the if anything, it'll give you an idea of where we are with it. Okay, so does anybody have any questions about that so far? Okay, the next thing that I do is I go again and squint and see where my strongest edges are. Okay, so I really want to get the feeling of the placement of certain things. All right, the amount of the angle that's there. Okay, and let's just let that go off the image area like that. Right there. You can even get into our shadow a little bit. This point underneath the porch. Side of the building here. And then really go into this foreground. I'm using thicker paint now. I'm still scumbling. All right. But I'm using thicker paint, and you saw me starting with very thin paint. Now I'm going to thicker paint. Okay, and the reason that I left the reason that I left the some of this here is that now I can come back. It's really interesting, but I can come back even with a rag, and I can wipe out now some of the values. Okay, so this is where I'm taking now and wiping away the lights, maybe with a little bit of mineral spirits, so we get back to the value of this. But you can kind of get an idea of how I'm using this this kind of wiping to just kind of build your values a little bit more. I just ran over this, so just keep in mind where I am with that. But this is the kind of thing that you can do when you're setting up your paint. Okay, and this actually works pretty nicely. All right, to get us to give us a feeling of the light and dark relationship. All right, and even some of the edges, somewhat you're gonna be playing with. Now we're gonna come back. Now I'm gonna use my flat brush, because the flat brush is a lot easier to make edges, you see, and to kind of put in your dark shapes. So I think you know, if anything, this is the kind of thing that we can do now too. You just throw those on, and I'm going to play a little bit more with some of this reflected light in here, because truthfully, that reflected light is not that important as much. It's got to be, it's dappled, so you're going to feel that dappled quality about it. Nothing you see here is you know, creating a problem now, okay? Because you're sort of just adjusting things, all right, for placement and the angles of things, all right. And want to make sure we got this angle of this roof right. All right, that angle of that roof is more like that, so it's not as, it doesn't have as high a peak, so we can kind of reduce that a little bit. Okay, and again, go back and get your darks. Come back in now and get your darks placed more solidly, and try to concentrate on patterns of shape. Okay, so we're trying to just let this kind of play against one another here. So we're going to be and this is where you can brush heavier. All right, and you notice how I'm brushing. I kind of crisscross a little bit. Okay, the might replace that a little bit where I want that to be right now, because it's right about here. And then you know, we have some light running through here, so we can throw a little bit of light in there. And now we have, and then we have, of course, the light on the porch, which I think all of this has to be really felt, you know, like solid light. Okay, so you see me kind of playing with that now, and I'll adjust this later as well. Okay, but we want to get this in relatively close to what's there. All right, once I do this is sort of a preliminary stage. It really is still a sketch. It's really not another, you know, totally what I'm after at this point. But now I can start to go after a color that dances together. All right, and what I'm going to do is go after my blue. All right, after against my my building. Okay, and understand the value change, how strong that value might change as it's pushing up against these different areas. Now, one of the nice things about having that brown underpainting is that if I really want to make this model it even more than what it is, all right, I'll just use more of the underpainting and rub it in. So that this blue takes on some of this burnt sienna. All right, which I think is a really an interesting way of working this. All right, is to use that color combination. Now, with that said, all right, we have to look at the two areas of blue, all right, that we're painting, because this one over here is much darker than this one over here. Okay, and by the way, you're going to see how close you get to color by using that burnt sienna and letting it mix in. Okay, so you can see the difference in value right away in those two. So we really want to work the value. All right, certainly. All right, we want to understand that the lights make the darks and the darks make the lights. So we have to read the value change and things like that. For instance, this is darker in here, right here, compared to on this side, and it's darker at the top. Okay, and then it gets lighter as it goes down. So that we're now kind of brushing that in like this. Okay, and over here, it's lighter as well. It's lighter over here. So keep in mind that the values are real important in understanding how we're looking at this. So you realize that it gets darker in here, and then it gets lighter as it goes toward that part of the roof. Okay, like that. All right, with that, the next thing is to go after perhaps maybe we could go after the greens, so we could go after the lights. Let's go after the lights right now. All right, this is where we're going to mix the yellow, Naples yellow with the white. Okay, and I'm going to go after where my strongest moment of light is. And by the way, the building feels taller than I made it. So here, as a matter of fact, so this goes up higher right here. But we can kind of play with that a little bit. But this is where we're mixing the white and the yellow, Naples yellow. Okay, and we're getting that feeling of that light. We're also looking for the pattern of the light, which means that the next part that's catching light is over here. And so now we're going to, uh-oh, what was that? That was my phone. All right, so here's the patterning that we're looking for now. Okay, and this is the lights, and you should know their order as well. Okay, so you should, in a way, paint them in the order by which you see them, which means that this was the one that was the strongest. And by the way, I could paint this whole painting with a brush this size. All right, so if it's a good brush, so just keep that in mind. Okay, so so now we're just laying, and here you can see how I can put wet paint on top of wet paint. All right, we should be able to do that. And I'm just going after the dappled light at this point. Maybe some of the subtle changes of light there. What's the value of this? All right. Well, guess what? The value of that this side is this dark. All right. So keep in mind that what we're dealing with here is a value that's darker than what I've made it here. All right, because this is another really important part of this painting that needs to be put in. And if you were working in watercolor, would you be brushing the same way? Yeah. Could you start this way? Yes, you could. All right. Would you preserve some of your light areas? You can, but can you pick up your paint? You can. You can literally put paint down and then pick it up, just like what I just did with the other part of this. So just keep this in mind. This is where I might use a palette knife a little bit more, only because I can place things stronger now. Here, all right, but we're looking for the pattern of light. Now, keep in mind something very important. If I really like this the way it is, then I'm just going to leave it. All right, believe it or not. I think that this is one of the things that's important to recognize about the way you tend to work this. All right, but at this point, you kind of get an idea of where I am. Anybody have any questions at this point? Is it working? Is it surprising the way I'm working? Anybody?
Well,
Yeah,
are you building your idea, or you're following what the painting is giving you?
I'm following what the painting is giving me. My eye is playing with the order, just like we were talking about with the order of the darks right now. I'm trying to build the pattern of the lights. Okay, so if anything, I'm establishing the strength of the lights, and it's interesting. But we're going to get eventually into making a green here. But you would think that it might be wise to paint it green in the beginning, but truthfully, you really want to get your values. All right, so you don't really worry about color as much. The blue sky helped to get the colors of the building or the whole painting, helped to get it to vibrate a little bit. All right, but right now we're still laying in some of our darks, and because we're using the burnt sienna as a dark, we're going to eventually go over it in color. All right, so just keep in mind how that's working as well. All right, so at this point, I'm playing with it like that.
Did you put the sky in to cover the canvas?
I put the sky in mostly to vibrate against the colors that I wanted to use. All right. In other words, it created a vibration. Now, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go after my I'm going to go after my greens here. But before I do that, I'm going to go after using my this is one of the keys to this palette is ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. All right. So now you see me putting in the darks with ultramarine blue and burnt sienna mixed together. And this way, this is where you're going to get your really richer contrast. And right now it feels a little on the green side because of the amount of burnt sienna to the amount of blue. But if I want it to be cooler, I'll just add more blue and it will go darker. So the next step is to add the this ultramarine blue, and now I can come back and mix my greens with the same color, by the way, two colors, but now I'm mixing more yellow into the burnt sienna. And so now you see me playing with that color that appears to be green. Okay, so now and the greens, by the way, the fascinating thing about the greens are that black and yellow and black and blue make greens. All right, or I'm sorry, blue and yellow make greens. All right, so keep in mind what we're mixing here now is a variety of burnt sienna, green, and black. Okay, because now I can start to get that working there, and probably more than anything is to get this foreground going because it's really dark. So we can kind of try and get that green in here now as well. All right. It's going to be hard to make real vibrant greens. All right, unless you have a yellow ochre that is really more on the yellow side. The one that I have is more on the orange side. So could you pull out another ochre or another yellow if you needed to in order to make the greens greener? You could. All right, but now you're seeing me at this point trying to work with the greens as a value. All right, which that's what I want everybody here to recognize. All right, is that we really want to get these values working. All right, and I think that the key is to really know what your strongest darks are and what your strongest lights are, and how you're going to build your idea around that. Okay, so I'm just right now just playing with trying to get the shape right a little bit, and what kind of value we're working with here. Okay, so you can see me now putting all of this in. And I'm trying to do this as fast as I can because the amount of time that we have, because we got a lot to do. But this is going to give you an idea. We're going to go after now a little bit darker value for the building right here. So I'm squinting now as I'm working, okay? And if anything, you know, what I would be doing next after I do this, there's an area right now, obviously, which is the building. By the way, the greens, I can really make a really nice green. I just did here. And this was going to go into the white because I had the white underneath. Now I made this green, and you can kind of see how that green is working here. Okay, it's surprising, but you're going to be surprised at all the colors you can make out of this little relationship of color. All right, so now I've got to make a violet. All right, this is really interesting because you take your blue, you take your burnt sienna, you mix them together, all right, with some white, and you actually can make a violet out of that. Okay, and now we're going to use that violet here, and you can kind of get an understanding of that mixing. That's surprising. All right, this is one of the things that's going to be really unique about this, is that you're going to be surprised at the number of colors that you can make out of the combinations that you're putting down here. Okay, and you know what you're trying to do is get your values. obviously, get your modeling. And so you can see how that's all starting to work. I'm adjusting my values. All right. So I really want to, like for instance, that's a little bit lighter than the other part. So I'll use, some ochre or whatever to lighten it just a hair. Okay. But you see, the darker I make the darks, the lighter the lights are becoming. All right. So I think that's real important. Let's get that violet, by the way, right here. That violet's got to go there, and then let's get that steeple to really go dark against that sky. Okay, and then we can work our edges, and generally speaking, I've got just about everything in. Could I still get this? You can see how I can make a different kind of blue than the blue of the sky. That's burnt sienna and ultramarine blue and white. So if anything, now you see how this is working. And so now, and then we can get into the blues of our on the side of our building here. So now once we do that, this is where the colors all start to vibrate against each other. And this is what this palette will do. This palette's a beautiful palette, believe me, for this, all right? If I want a little bit redder, violet, there, like that. Let's get this in here. Play our edges a little bit. This is where we take our contrast and we really make the edge. By other. So now you see me blocking it in. All right, this is what we mean by blocking in. And I come back and throw those highlights back in there. Yeah, I will, but I've got other areas to work right now. Okay, and try to get the values right and try to get the color combination right. And keep in mind that the burnt sienna is a warm color. And so what it does against this is it really makes for a really interesting vibration. And now we'll go after our green highlights. And our green in our tree now. Anybody have any questions? Okay, and then go after our edges. Edges are real important. Okay, keep in mind that you can mix all these different colors together. All right, but we really want to understand what the edges are and how strong they are. And a lot of it is how we put a color up against the color. So now we're just going after this. Now let's get that highlight of that red light on the side of the building. That's going to be a hard one because we do not have red. Okay, we only have burnt sienna. Add white to it and it can get dull. All right, that's not going to be light enough. So we're going to go after its value more than its color because it's harder to make exactly to make it as red as we might want. Okay, but I'm gonna just about be done here now, just unless somebody has any questions. I've made some, I'm gonna show you the different greens and that I've made. This is a gorgeous one that I just made here. All right, and they come when you're believe it or not, when you least expect them to come. All right. But here you see the green now that I've been able to make in this foreground. Okay. Anybody have any questions? Because this is what you're going to do for me for next week.
I have one question about the light paint. How do you keep it so light when you're painting over the burnt sienna?
You need a brush. You need a brush that's flexible. All right. This is a very good brush. All right. Flat brush. Flat brushes are if you have really well worn brushes and they have too much paint in them, they won't lay on. You won't be able to lay on paint on top of something. But I can lay a strong light on here. Okay. And if that doesn't work, then sometimes I'll take a palette knife and scrape that so that I get the paint down less, and then lay that brush stroke on top of that. All right, but this is a nice flat brush, and I'm using, by the way, I'm using paint like this.
Oh, okay.
All right, so when you see me use, like for instance here, now I'm really using it even thicker. What you're seeing me do is make this little by little by the thickness of the paint, meaning that with each addition, I'm adding more and more thicker paint to it. So what do you think? That help you?
Yep, thank you.
All right, let me show you my palette now real quick. Okay, and show you what this looks like. Oops. But here's some of the greens that I'm making. All right, and this is a beautiful green. You might not be able to see it that much because how dark it is, but it's a really rich green, and you see how I'm mixing these different colors together up here as well. Okay, so really we want you to now I didn't use any red. Okay, say you needed red for your painting, then go ahead and put some red on your palette. Okay, But I'm gonna tell you, you can wind up mixing quite a lot here. And you'd be surprised what you're gonna get, okay? So we're looking for a value study. We need to know what the strongest moment of light is. Where is it? You know, I think this is one of the things, from my point of view, there's the strongest piece of light. I'm trying to build this on this painting relative to that. Okay? So I have to do it that way. All right? Anybody have any questions? Nothing?
I've got one. Well, if you were doing something like let's say trees against a sky background, would you do a wash in the sort of in some sort of blue so that it would be there as a
No.
background?
No.
No. Okay.
I'm gonna go after the value and color.
Okay.
Try and mix the value and color. I'm never gonna put down something arbitrary.
All right.
Okay, I'll tell you that. Now that burnt sienna underneath, that unified the whole painting. Keep in mind what that burnt sienna did. All right, because that mixed into just about every color, and that's what the tonalists are about. So when we look at when you look at the variations, look here. The temperature changes. Okay. And I could refine and refine and refine this. All right. I think that the key here is I might wind up lining up some of these lines a little bit. Like this one is not in the right angle at this point. So I'd build that. But I could layer on top of this more and more. Okay, and get the direction of light. Like for instance, the real strong direction of light on that one area is right here. Right here is a real strong direction. Let's see if I can get that in there. But it's right in here is a real strong direction of light. Well, you can only make that so light. All right. Then you have to make this darker to make that lighter. Everybody understand that?
Yes.
Okay, that's the key. The key is that this color doesn't look, I mean, you're gonna say, I want it lighter than that. Guess what? That's light enough. The key here is in the playing of the darks now. And how they work in the design of that tree. Okay? So, but I want to know where the strongest moment of light is, where the strongest dark is, where your strongest edge is. If you want me to send